Spirit Sports Consultants presents our weekly NFL picks.
AFC Divisional Playoff, our picks for all games. We're going to do a separate video in which we look at the NFC games. We already have the matchup set with the Commanders and the Lions. We're still waiting to find out who the Eagles are going to host, whether it will be the Vikings or the Rams. So subscribe, set notifications to get that. We will release that later tomorrow. And now the AFC. NFL Playoffs Divisional Round. Let's start off with the Texans and the Chiefs on Saturday, 4:30 on ESPN. Followed by what we think is the best matchup of the weekend, Ravens at the Bills. Wow, MVP battle. Sunday, 6:30 on CBS. Let's take a look first at the Texans at the Chiefs. This is a rematch of a Week 16 matchup in which the Texans actually represented themselves rather well. Came down to this key play in which should have been the game-tying touchdown. Ended up being a touchdown. They missed the extra point. Losing receiver Tank Dell. That was huge. Second best receiver on the team. C.J. Stroud's best friend. He was not the same after that. You could see that effort wasn't there. They ended up losing 27-19. But played really well. Let's look at the wild card results here. Texans with that great defensive victory, 32-12 over the Chargers. KC, of course, with the first round bye. You want to look at the Texans' defense. They were able to turn over Herbert 4 times, 4 interceptions, and he only threw 3 all season. They did a similar thing to Jared Goff. Great season by the Lions quarterback, 5 interceptions. They ended up losing the game on a last-second field goal due to the fact that C.J. Stroud made a few ill-timed interceptions, including this one here when they were already in field goal range. And the Chiefs, another dominant year. We have the 15-2 with an asterisk because they could have only had 1 loss had they played their starters against the Broncos in the final game. A lot of close wins. This one here, the doink field goal to beat the Chargers. Had a game, the first game of the season. Ravens, the tying touchdown. Toe out of bounds, blocked the field goal against the Broncos that would have won the game. So a very interesting season by the Chiefs. Dominant in the win-loss column, but they're not blowing teams out. So we looked that they could be vulnerable. And the Texans, on the other hand, a 10-7 in record. It's all defense, very inconsistent offense. The defense, as we stated, top 5, very impressive. And we think that defensive dominance starts with head coach DeMeco Ryans, former defensive coordinator of the 49ers, former linebacker for the Texans, and their best player, we think, Derek Stingley, cornerback. Number 3 pick a few years back. This year, first team All-Pro, well-deserved, great season. And on the other side of the offense, Pro Bowlers, Joe Mixon, running back, Nico Collins, receiver, and offensive tackle, Laramie Tunsil. So the Texans do have some top performers. The weakness this year has been the guy that was great last year, and that's C.J. Stroud. And not that he's been bad, he just has not been dominant. Had a great game against the Lions early, then threw this interceptions late, ultimately cost the Texans the game. And the game against the Chargers started off with a very questionable interception here that really put them in bad shape. Already down 6-0. They ended up coming back, obviously. If you follow this channel, you know 2 of us here are Texans fans, and we know the Texans playoff history. We picked the Texans against the Chargers because they're 5-1. They were 4-1 wild card round. Never won a road playoff game, 0-4 in the divisional round. Goes back to the Oiler days. They have never won and have never been in a championship game since the days of Earl Campbell. So with that, all that history, our score projection for this one, Chiefs to win it. We like them winning at 27-17. Not as dominant, not as much of a blowout as a lot of people think. Again, we think that defense keeps them in. So that player props, we want to take Mahomes with 1 interception or more. Get that. Similarly, because of C.J. Stroud and some of his weakness this season, we think you take C.J. Stroud and 1 interception for this season. And finally, our best bets, we think the Chiefs obviously try to get that number under 7. We're going to go for -6.5, 7.5. It gets you in that trouble over the 7 key number. We're going to tease that down to get it under 3. And we think the over might be in play because we think, despite the fact these pass defenses are so great, those interceptions could turn into pick sixes. And next we have the game we think is the best matchup of the weekend. We got the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson having a phenomenal season. And if they weren't good enough already, they add Derrick Henry, and they just proceeded to be dominant. And again, Josh Allen, MVP caliber season. Who would have thought he would have been better than prior years? We think this game is the matchup, the battle for the MVP. We think these are the top 2 favorites, with apologies to Saquon, Jared Goff, and Darnold and others. These 2 have had phenomenal seasons. So take a look at it. We're putting out a video on Friday. And subscribe and set notifications to get that. We're going to look at all these players that are up for the MVP and give our projection for who we think is going to win, and maybe who should win. So join us for that.
And before we continue, if you would, just join our channel. And if you like this video or find it useful, like it and then subscribe. We provide weekly NFL picks, highlights, and sports travel. Thank you.
So for this game, we're going to look at the prior results of the earlier game. We're going to look at some statistics. We're also going to look at current health to influence our decision and give you our projected score and best bets at the end. But in the prior matchup, the Ravens ran away with this one quite literally, 35-10. The dual-pronged attack of Lamar and Derrick Henry was just too much for Buffalo to handle. The game was in Baltimore, but we want to look at some offensive stats to show you how good that Ravens offense has been. Rushing, as you might expect, leading the league, 185 yards per game, but the key number, 5.7 yards per rush, almost a yard better than the closest team, a yard better than the Bills. Again, we said number 1 in the NFL. But then on the flip side, they can beat you with the pass too. Lamar putting up incredible numbers, and the passing offense, they're not leading in yardage, but they're leading in yards per attempt, even more important. 238 passing yards, 9 yards per attempt. That's impressive. Again, that number 1 in the NFL, better even than the Lions, Chiefs, other teams you think are better passing. Now let's look at the Buffalo Bills. There's one statistical advantage we think they might have over the Ravens. It's significant. And let's look at what Josh Allen has done all year. Again, MVP candidate, as we've stated. A great game against the Lions, really humbled them, and then plays like this all season long. Been very impressive. So let's get into the numbers. In the one category we see the Bills having a big advantage is passing offense. If you look at the numbers, they average 234 passing yards per game. That's pretty good. And then 7.8 yards per attempt. That's the number that we key on. Tells you how efficient an offense is. Then on the flip side, the Ravens defense. They have made improvements since week 11, but if you look at their full season stats, they allow 248 passing per game. That's a high number. And then their yards per attempt is not much better at 7.3. That is the worst of all the playoff teams currently for the AFC. So when we look at these numbers, that's an advantage that Josh Allen has if he can exploit the cornerback play of the Ravens, keep them in. If the Ravens have an issue with Zay Flowers not being able to play, and if they have to run the ball all game long, the Bills may be able to keep in it with this advantage in the passing game. And next, let's take a look at some injury concerns, more specifically for the Ravens than the Bills. Key receiver Zay Flowers, Pro Bowler, was hurt in the final regular season game, did not play against the Steelers, and the injury could be significant. We are basing this prediction on the assumption that he will play. We're recording this on Monday. Let's follow up on Friday. We're going to have an update to this if we find out he is or not playing. A lot of times they're not honest on the injury report, so we really won't know until we see if he practices or not. On the flip side, no real significant injuries for the Bills. Ray Davis sustained a concussion, but he's on the depth chart way behind James Cook, so that shouldn't affect the Bills as much as Zay Flowers does the Ravens. And for our score prediction, our gut instinct told us Buffalo. We had to look at the numbers to back it up. We're fans of neither team, but we think that the Ravens have more balance. We think we said already their lone weakness is on pass defense, and those stats have greatly improved since Week 11, since they moved Kyle Hamilton back to the deep safety. We think if they can defend Josh Allen in that category, all other categories benefit the Ravens. They stop the run really well. They allow 82 per game. They should be able to slow James Cook down. They run it well. They throw it well. Again, this prediction is based on the assumption that Zay Flowers plays. If he does not, revisit that. But currently, as 1.5 to 2 point underdogs, we really like the Ravens in this game. Player props from Buffalo. We're looking at James Cook to come down below his average. He got 120 rushing yards against Denver, but we think up against that Ravens defense, they allow 82 per game. Those numbers should come down a little bit. And we think in this battle of prospective MVP candidates, Josh Allen's going to take it on himself to score a touchdown, so we like him as an anytime TD. And then the Bills average 4.7 rushing yards allowed per carry. We think Lamar and Derek both take advantage of that, get those rushing numbers above their averages. So again, check the numbers later this week so we see where they are. We think both Lamar and Derek should put up higher than average numbers against this Bills rushing defense. And just a reminder to subscribe and set notifications to get part 2 of this, in which we look at the NFC Divisional matchups. That we won't know the matchups until later tonight. We're recording this on Monday, so we'll have that out on Tuesday mid-afternoon. So subscribe and set notifications so you make sure you see that.
That's all for this time. Thank you for joining. Please subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to sharing our future videos with you.